All right. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Tonight we are joined by Vish at Books with V to talk about The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Yay!
Oh, we have two different covers. Woo.
Oh, yes. I was always jealous of your cover over mine.
It is very beautiful. I
I
think
think
this
it
is
makes more sense to the
yeah.
story than
I'm-
my cover
Yeah.
does.
I saw those paperbacks. It's so weird.
It
It looks
is. I mean, it's beautiful, but it doesn't make very much sense to the actual story.
no.
You know,
It doesn't. What is that in the middle?
a ship.
Kind of makes sense, but it
Yeah,
just
I
makes
mean, yeah, we can talk about that when we get to spoilers. Uh, hey, Christy.
hello.
So I guess we're gonna start off trying to talk non-spoiler for a couple minutes, as much as we can,
Yeah.
and then we'll go into spoilers. So, Vish, what did you think of the Starless Sea?
I actually gave it 4 stars, which is good because it's a solid, good book. The writing was great. It was very, very like whimsical and it flowed really, really well. I loved the little stories in between. I grew to love the characters because at first, obviously, I didn't know them very much. And then, like, halfway or about maybe almost to the end, like, I started having feelings for them more. But mainly, why it's not my favorite is just because the entire time I was trying to figure out what was going on instead of enjoying the story for what it was. And like I still enjoyed it, but not as much as I would want to. I was just mostly trying to figure out what is going on because that's the entire book.
Yeah, I I had a very similar experience. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, mostly because when I finished it, I couldn't stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
And that's usually an indicator that it has to be 5 stars for me. But I was the same way. I was reading it and I was trying to figure it out and trying to figure out how all of the pieces were going to fit together. And I was worried that there was going to be some hole at the end or a loose
Yeah.
thread at the end that didn't connect to everything.
Hmm.
And so I wasn't able to, I think, fully appreciate the beauty of the prose and the poetic style that Morgenstern wrote with.
Yeah.
And I think I can see myself reading this like every year
Yeah.
and
Sorry.
getting something different out of it every time I read it.
I can see that too. That's why I feel like upon reread, I would like it even more. But just as like for now, as I've read it for the first time, it's still like a 4 star because it's not like my absolute favorite.
Yeah.
It's still a good book.
I think like I appreciated her character development throughout the
Yeah.
book. Like there were such dynamic characters that she could have probably gotten away without very much character development just because they're so dynamic and there were
Yeah.
so many different ones playing together. But it felt like she developed each character
Yeah.
to their storyline really well when she
Yeah.
could
And
have
she didn't
just
have to do that
right.
because the whole story itself was already intriguing.
Yeah.
And if you didn't care about the characters, that's like fine because the entire thing was like intricate.
Yeah. So,
Whatever those ratings. That
yeah,
is.
what did you guys think of it? The peanut gallery over there.
I think from what I saw, a lot of people are like in the range of 5 to 4 as well. At least that's what I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Nope.
Oh, Chrissy hasn't read it yet.
That's okay.
Okay, so here's something to talk about. Was it the style that made it a little confusing?
Sort of. It's
Yeah.
basically the way the story was told you're just kind of thrown into a story and you're trying to make sense of that story and what is happening because everything seems very, very weird and it's not really explained what's happening.
Yeah.
And obviously, at the end of the book, everything ties together.
Right.
But throughout the book, you're trying to figure out what is happening.
And
And
there's also like other stories within the bigger Starless Sea story
yeah,
that's being played around throughout the book too. And then at the end, they're like Vish said, they're all tied together. But it's like we've got this story that we're kind of thrown in the middle of, but then there's also these other like side stories in between like the main chapters that you're trying to figure out how do these play in with the bigger story.
mm-hmm. And it's so interesting to see how they all interconnect with each other. And I thought that was brilliant and fascinating.
Absolutely.
The way she did it, like I just thought they were just like, little stories. And I thought that at least some of them would be relevant to the story. But no, all of them have a purpose and all of them shows us a bit of the world and how it interconnects into like for the end, which is again fascinating.
I was blown away by that bit. I was like, that had to take. I watched an interview with her earlier today, and she said it took her like 5 years to write this. And I can see why. It was so intricate and so detailed, and everything just tied to like she made sure there was no loose ends anywhere.
Which is really hard to do considering how much detail there was throughout the book. And I was like, how is everything going to be explained?
Yeah.
And she did it in such a way. I was like, oh, well, that explains everything. It's just easier.
Hi, Andrew. Okay. So Chrissy also asked, how different is it from the Night Circus? Have you read the Night Circus? I've read it. We're twins today. For me, it had like the same kind of like melancholy type of tone to it, but it felt totally different.
Yeah.
Like, it's so hard to explain because it felt the same, but it felt totally different at the same time.
For me, I think they were definitely totally different, but the atmosphere is the same just because that's how Erin Morgenstern writes. The way she writes creates that atmosphere that is present in both Night Circus and Starless Sea, but they're both completely different. For me, I feel like the Starless Sea was better than Night Circus. I thought the Night Circus was just a tad boring, just because like it was very, very slow. And even the Starless Sea is kind of like a slow burn. It was still very engaging, and because there's so many things going on and you're just trying to keep up with it, even though it's like a very slow story. Whereas the Night Circus is just kind of like this one plot thing, and you're just trying to get through the story and trying to find out what's happening and just taking in the atmosphere that is in the Night Circus. Whereas in Starless Sea, you're taking in the atmosphere and you're trying to figure out what's going on. So it's a lot compared to the Night Circus.
I feel like if you weren't invested in the two main characters in the Night Circus, then you wouldn't get much out of that book. Whereas there's so much going on in the Starless Sea that even if you don't like our main characters, there's other people that you can attach to and still appreciate the story as a whole. So let's see, what else do we have? Kristen says the jump added to confusion for sure, but I think it pulls together by the end. Haven't experienced such beautiful writing in a long time. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very beautiful writing. Yeah. Like, okay, I know I said in my Addie LaRue video, I was like, okay, the writing, I don't get. Everyone says it's beautiful. And I'm like, this is just normal writing to me. This is beautiful writing.
Yeah.
To me, at least. Obviously, everyone has their own, like.
Yeah. And I feel like I learned in the interview I watched earlier today, which was a long interview, Erin Morgenstern grew up as a theater girl. She was a theater kid in like high school and college. And reading this and also the Night Circus, I can totally see the theater role
Yeah,
play
it's very
out.
dramatic. It's very theatrical. I can
Yeah.
definitely see that.
She's working on a spring themed book now.
Is that like? Oh no, that's V.E. Schwab. I think it was like Secret Garden meets something. I think that's
Yeah, I
Gloria
think that
Schwab.
was, yeah.
Yeah.
She said because the Night Circus was like a winter read, and this
Mhm.
for her is like an autumnal read, that now she feels like she has to write something that's like spring.
That's cute. I love
That
that.
was when this first came out, I think, that interview. Let's see. A lot of people are going to be reading the Night Circus soon, it sounds like.
Like, read it and see what you think.
Yeah.
Just because I know a lot of people love the Night Circus because of the atmosphere, and they love the characters as well. So you might also love the characters.
Absolutely. I enjoyed the Night Circus. I liked the Starless Sea more than the Night Circus. I think I gave the Night Circus a 4.5. Jessie, I'll probably buy anything she writes.
You should.
Same.
It's great.
Same, Jessie. So Kristen says, I remember getting super emotional at some point in the second half of the book, and I'm not the crying type.
Okay. She should tell us exactly which point
when we get to spoilers. Yeah, we'll circle back to that, Kristen. Remind us. Okay, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about in our spoiler-free?
I don't know if this is a spoiler, but it's just the repeating of the bee, the key, and the sword.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of repetition with that. And at one point, I was getting very frustrated. I'm like, what does this mean? But
yeah,
they all, like, I don't know if it was explained. Was it explained?
Kind of. I think with like when they were talking about like the different doors and stuff.
Yeah. And like what symbols mean. Do you remember that? It's like something, they don't mean it. It's just up for your interpretation or something like that.
Yeah.
I think
like each symbol went with like a different type of person they had in the Starless Sea library thing, which she doesn't like to call a library, by the way.
Oh.
She's like, people call it like the underground library, but she's like, it didn't really feel like a library to me because there weren't librarians there to help. She's like, people weren't like jumping to help you there.
Sanctuary more than a library.
Yeah. Archives. Okay, so I have a question for everyone.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to put it up here first so I don't forget. So in the very beginning of Starless Sea, our main character, Zachary, goes to this like costume literary party.
Yeah.
So my question for you guys are, what would you dress up as if you went to this party?
Oh, that's a good question. You go first. Well, I think.
Okay. Let me. I think, so a really quick funny story. In my last job I had, not this job, but the job before that, they were big into Halloween in the office. And they had like a Halloween costume contest every year. And my second day on the job was the Halloween. And it was my first staff meeting. And my new boss had like hyped up this costume contest so much before I started that I'm like, I have to dress up as something. So I like threw together a costume from like the Salvation Army in my mom's closet, and it was Professor Trelawney from Harry Potter. And I won second place, but I had to introduce myself to everyone at the staff meeting dressed as Professor Trelawney. And no one told me that like people get into their costume before the party starts. They don't wear their costume all day. So I was dressed as Professor Trelawney all day long on my second day of work there.
That's so funny. Oh no. Oh God.
But I would probably go like I've always wanted to be Luna Lovegood. So I
I
would
can
either
see
go with
what-
her or like someone low key that like is still technically a literary character, or like a maybe like an author or something, but that is not like completely elaborate. That takes a lot of work because I'm very low maintenance.
Yeah. I can definitely see you as Luna Lovegood, to be honest.
Thank you. So who would you be, Vish?
Right now, from the top of my head, just because the movie's coming out, is Black Widow.
I can't wait for that movie.
Yeah, me too.
So Christy Christy has named me Kate the Imaginator.
That's
Because
cute.
in my Q&A video, one of the questions was, what would be your like superhero name? And I'm like, I have no idea. I'm putting it out to everyone else. And Chrissy's the only one that's responded. So that's apparently my name.
Nah, that's good.
Um,
Oh, I would be the dragon if
Dragon.
yes, it's Daenerys. I would be the dragon.
Excellent.
I would be her child.
Oh, there's your darker shade of magic.
Yeah.
Now, see, that would be interesting if you were the dragon and Jessie was Daenerys.
She would be my mom, which is already like that.
I mean,
anyway.
Yeah, it's basically life already.
I am her child.
Let's see, Kristen would be Howl from Howl's Moving Castle. Yep.
I've actually never seen the movie or read the book, so I have
Me
no
either.
idea.
But it sounds, I believe her. I believe Kristen. Everyone agrees, so we're apparently in the minority here.
She said she'd choose Sophie.
So, from Howl's Moving.
House,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
I think
Kim wants to be Sophie too.
I tried to read the book, but I DNF'd it just because I wasn't vibing with the writing style. But I do remember these names. That's a good one.
That's cute, Kim. You could totally pull it off, Kristen.
Yeah.
Totally. I don't even know what it is, but I trust that you could pull it off.
Yeah. Yeah, because like your arm hangs out and it's just on your shoulders. I think that's how it goes, yeah.
Totally pull it off.
That's a good one.
All right. So, shall we go into spoilers now? Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Like I said, it's really hard to talk about this book.
It's so hard to talk about it, and especially with no spoilers, because everything that you want to talk about is in spoilers. So I'm going to put a spoilers banner up here. So everyone that hasn't read this yet, that doesn't want to be spoiled, have a fantastic night. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right. Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritties of the Starless Sea.
Yes.
Where do you want to start, Vish? Since you're the guest.
Let's see. I was a bit thrown off when I first started the book and there were the small stories. I was a bit thrown off. I'm like, ooh, how am I supposed to remember all this? But as I read it, and because the whole point of this is that as we're reading it, Zachary reads it as well when he gets the books. And Zachary is also trying to make sense of what is happening.
Yeah.
So like we're not trying to figure it out alone, which is very good because I was very confused. And he was also very confused. And that's the thing. We were following Zach through this and he was also very, very confused. And I don't know if he got an explanation because we got an explanation from is that her name Kate? Is her name Kate?
Is there Kate in this book that I totally missed?
It's like the diary of Katrina, not Kate.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because we got that explanation from
Kat
at the end about what this whole thing is about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't at least from what we get in the pages, I don't think he gets a full explanation of what
No.
really happened. He gets like bits and parts of explanations, but I don't remember anyone ever explaining to him like
No.
how his story got into this book.
Yeah.
Did I miss that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think he got an explanation because he died. He just
Right.
died. But that's the thing. The one thing that I wanted to ask was, because he has the heart now,
Mhm.
are they, Dorian and Zach, fate and time now?
That's how I took it. Like,
Yeah. So like the story is continuing, like a different
right,
story, and the mantle is passed on to them.
right.
So Kat is like the main character now because she went through that door.
Yeah.
And because of the whole thing with Dorian and Zach, and he got the heart of fate, that
Jesse
now
agrees.
your time and fate. Yeah, that's how I took it when I read it. And yes, the Ballad of Simon and Eleanor is my
That was
favorite book.
so they were what, the sun and the moon too? Or was that a whole different story that I put together?
Don't think they were the sun and the moon, because the moon was that lady from the inn. The innkeeper's wife
Oh,
was.
okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because
I
we have
think.
Mirabelle and the keeper. They were the pirate and the girl at the beginning,
Mhm.
and then at the end we find out they're also time and fate before
Yeah, because
Zachary
the
gets
pirate and the
fate's heart.
girl were metaphors.
Right. I
For
loved
this.
that was my favorite story.
That was my
Was the
favorite story
pirate
as
and the
well.
girl, and then keeper and Mirabelle. I loved following them throughout the whole book.
I think I like. There's a few tabs here that I tabbed for like favorite stories. What was this one? This one was the pirate and the girl, and then the other one was the man who collected keys.
Oh
Because I
yes.
thought that was really really cool that he just had keys everywhere, and everyone gave him keys to collect as
Yeah,
well.
that's what.
And then
Go ahead.
when people when people lost a key, they come to him to find the key. And that end of that little story where she opens the door to another world and he goes in with her. So that was really good. I like
Yeah,
that as well.
that was in that interview that I watched with the author. That was the bit that she read out
Mm,
during the interview. It was like a author signing, reading, question and answer type of thing.
yeah.
And just hearing her read that bit was even more magical than the actual book
Yeah.
was. It was just
Did
like,
you listen to the audiobook?
I didn't.
I listened to the audiobook. There's actually a few different narrators within the audiobook.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah. It's really nice.
Good.
Um the stories had one narrator, and then Zach had one narrator, and then Kat had one narrator. Yeah, so it was really nice. It was very soothing
That's an
to listen to.
interesting way to split it up.
Yeah,
Like I can see it, but that's interesting. Yeah, I agree with Jesse. Next time I read it, I might try the audio. Now
yeah,
that I
because
know like what the story is about and everything.
yeah, because I read the book while listening to the audio, just because I have trouble concentrating sometimes, so I just need to like overload my sense. So I did that, which was very nice. It was also very immersive, obviously.
Kristen loved it too. Um,
Another story was the woman who sculpted stories. That was
oh yeah,
beautifully written.
yes.
I thought that was beautifully written.
I
Yeah,
would
because
read an entire book just with these little stories in them.
yeah, exactly, exactly. There's a lot. I tabbed like a lot of quotes that were in this because there were a lot of beautiful quotes.
Definitely. I have like a whole quotes book that I keep while I'm reading, and there was a lot in there.
Yeah, my yellow tabs are the ones that are quotes, but you can't really see them.
Yep.
But like they're all there. Some pink tabs, sorry, are quotes as well, but They're not all quotes.
It was just a very quotable book.
It is. It's just so beautiful.
But then it's like one of those books where if you quote it to someone who hasn't read the book, they're going to be like, what does that mean? And I'm like, read the book and find out.
Yeah. The one quote that I didn't really get was "We're all stardust and stories." I get the stories part, but what's stardust?
I think it goes with the Starless Sea bit because it's a starless sea. So all the stars have turned to dust.
Oh.
And there's like, I guess there's like, I grew up with like I don't know if it was just my family or not, but like a lot of times when like my grandparents were tucking us in at night when we stayed with them, my grandma would, have us go through our prayers and everything as kids. And then she would tell us like that the stars were people looking down at you from heaven. And like all of their stories were up there in the stars now. So for me, that quote was like hugely important because I had that upbringing as a kid.
Yeah.
So it meant, I don't know if that's what she meant by it, but that's what I took it as.
There was one specific quote that I really resonated with, but I'm just trying to find it. But you go on, because I don't know where it is.
So one of the things that we talked about before we went live was that there's a quote I wrote down: if all endings are beginnings, are all beginnings also endings?
Yeah.
And I love that idea of just like the infinite story. At one point, I think they say like all stories live forever if they're kept being told. And that was kind of in the interview that I watched with her earlier. The interviewer explained that what she took from this book was that books have a beginning, middle, and an end, but stories are infinite. Stories are endless.
Yeah, and it says on the last few pages is that this is not where their story ends. Their story is only just beginning, and no story ever truly ends as long as it is told.
Yeah.
So that's essentially what she was saying.
Yep.
And I found the quote that I was saying.
Oh, good.
Know thyself and learn to suffer. Because that is so true.
That made me chuckle so much. It's so true.
Yeah. That was a good one. Because I was like, that's so true. I'm just going to suffer forever.
Okay, Jesse says, I don't know if it was in this, but there's a myth in a lot of cultures, myths that people are created from bits of stardust. So that's an interesting thought.
I've heard about that, but I'm not sure if it's culture-wise. It might be a myth. I don't know. But I have heard that people are created from bits of stardust.
Yeah. Kristen, yes, I'll put the interview. I'll have to go back and find it in my history. I'll link that on both of our Discords so you guys can have that.
Yes, please.
Because it was a really interesting interview. There was a lot of great things that were said about it. Yeah. One of the quotes I wrote down that I still wonder about was from, I think, towards the middle of the book, maybe towards the end. I wrote down page 434 in my copy. It says, soon the dragon will come to eat the world.
Yeah.
And that was like one of those quotes that, like, out of context, I loved that quote, but I have no idea what it meant. I read that. I'm like, we haven't seen dragons at all in this book. Why is there a dragon being brought up now?
I know. I was like, ooh, dragons? Where? I want the dragon.
And I think, like, a dragon is mentioned later on, like, one more time, but it still is not really, like, explained. I'm glad that you thought that, too, because I'm like, did I miss something with this dragon? Because I really like that quote, but I have no idea what it means.
I don't know either. And I am confused about sort of the Owl King aspect. Because I know in the end, the Owl King... No, in the beginning they said that the owls picked apart fate. Yeah. And one of the owls ate the eye of the fate.
Yeah.
and then they became the Owl King because they can see.
Mm.
And the Owl King is replaced every like so years or whatever. A different Owl King takes its place. And at the end, when they've said that there are certain people in this story that didn't want the story to end, like Allegra, who didn't want the story to end, and she knew it needed to end and she didn't want it to, so she tried to not let it end.
Right.
And does that mean the owls as well didn't want it to end?
That's how I took it, but I was confused in how the owls and the Owl King played into the rest of the
Yeah,
story.
because the Owl King was hyped up the entire story, and we
Right.
didn't really see the Owl King except for when I think that was the Owl King leading Dorian to the inn.
Yes.
So that does that mean the owls want the story to end? That was very confusing.
I I felt like they didn't want it to end because they were leading Dorian to a different location than where Zachary was.
Okay.
They were kind of leading, like, I feel like the owls, because the Owl King, they're supposed to, like, know everything, they
Yeah.
would have known where Zachary was and
Mm-hmm.
what it would have done if Zachary and Dorian were together again,
Yeah.
So I feel like because they led Dorian in a different direction to a different inn,
Yeah.
that they, wanted to keep the mystery going.
Yeah. And
Does that make sense?
yeah. And then when I think it was Zachary that was going through this like dark cave, and there's the voice in his head messing with him, and then Simon comes in and rescues him from it. I'm guessing that's the owls or the Owl King
Yeah.
messing with his head so that he doesn't continue on with his journey. So that was, yeah. So there was a bit of a confusion there as to what the owls were and what they represent. And I think they just didn't want the story to end, but every story needs to end.
Yep. So a new story can begin.
Exactly. It's that I think that one really resonated with me when Kat starts talking about it. I think I tabbed it somewhere where every story needs to end. Endings are what gives stories meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like it kind of reminds me of how we as readers we need that ending to give a resolution so we can move on to the next story. But that doesn't mean that even though there's a resolution, that doesn't mean the story is already like finished, because it's still going on in our heads. It's always alive in our heads. It's always there.
Yeah. It's always, I still think about this book like every other day.
I mean, I just finished it, so we'll see.
I finished it, I think it was last week or the week before that, a couple weeks ago. And when I finished it, I was just like, I loved what I just read, but also what did I just read?
Exactly. I think I'm still in that stage of like, what did I just read? I'm trying to make sense of everything just because I feel like not everything was explained in detail like we're used to in other fantasy books. Whereas in this one, it's just like Kat just got an explanation from a very brief explanation from Mirabelle. And I was like, oh, this all makes sense now.
Right.
Because all Mirabelle just said is just that it's a story. The entire thing is just a story. And we need to close that story in order to begin again. And the story has been delayed in ending because people don't want it to end.
Yeah.
But every story needs an ending or resolution in order to move on to the next story. But that doesn't necessarily mean a story's ended.
How did you feel about the bit where we get like the alternate reality kind of at Zachary's mom's house, where he's there with Dorian and Kat and they're at like the annual party?
And then when Dorian comes out and then he says to Zach, I think That's the Owl King messing with him,
Okay.
I think. I mean, why else would that alternate reality be there? Unless Zachary was just imagining it and he's scared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Glad we can help out, Kristen. I
Unless, yeah.
I thought that was like a hallucination type of deal going on, but I'm like, why are we getting this as like
Yeah.
readers of this story? Like, what is this supposed to mean to us?
Yeah. Maybe it's because sometimes we doubt ourselves as to what is real and what is not.
Mhm.
And then we always think of like though that hallucination where he's just like, oh, am I having an episode or am I actually
Yeah,
going through this?
yeah.
Kind of like surrealism, I guess.
I get like for me, it was kind of like we have so many stories in this book, and as we're kind of plotting through the book, we're until we get to the very end, we're trying to figure out what's the real story and what are these other fake stories. Because like the smaller stories in between, like Zachary's story to me, at least at the beginning, felt more like fables or like fairy
Mhm.
tales. And then like once we get to the end, we realize that there are people that we've met all along this way. They're real people, and they're not just stories being told. Um,
Yeah.
so like the whole hallucination Owl King thing was like, is this a real story, or is this the real story and everything else
Yeah.
was just a dream type of
Yeah.
deal, or is everything else the real story,
Yeah.
so
Either Erin Morgenstern was just trying to mess us up as to what is real and if this was all fake, or the Owl King itself or the owls were just messing with Zachary to make him think that he's just hallucinating everything and he doesn't have to go on.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Molly, I would totally agree with you. I think a lot of things there was a lot of things explained in the end, but also a lot of things left up in the air for us readers to um, try to interpret
Interpret. Yeah,
ourselves.
and I think with what you said with the interview, how she said that Erin Morgenstern said that she doesn't want to tell a reader how to read or interpret
Yeah,
things. So I think that's essentially what the message is as well
yeah,
as to how we interpret stories ourselves.
yeah,
It doesn't everything doesn't really need to be explained. It's just how you interpret it.
yep. Let's see, Jesse. I thought like they want to choose the alternate reality and not the end. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what I thought as well.
So, okay, a while back, Kristen had said that there was a point in the story that made her really emotional, and
Yes.
she's not
What is it?
much of a crier. For we'll wait for Kristen to type in her answer when she was emotional. For me, the part that really got me like what is going on and also like super emotional was when we had Dorian going through his thing in the woods and
Mm,
stabbing at the different Zachary's that he saw, and
yeah.
then like he stabbed the real Zachary and he's like, crap, I did not think that was going to be the real one. And I was like, wait, we still got all of this pages left. What's going to
Yeah.
happen in this story now that our main character is just
Dead in the sand.
dead?
Also, did you expect the Starless Sea to be honey?
Not at all.
Me
But
neither.
it
I was like,
also like
no.
it helps explain the whole bees thing.
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
once I connected that to the bees, I was like, okay, that gives them a little bit more purpose and makes
Hmm.
sense. Especially seeing like your cover compared to my cover.
Yes,
um,
that's true.
but was not. I was expecting like real water, not honey at all.
Yeah.
I'm like, why can't he swim in this? And then it's like, it felt like honey. I'm like, so the Starless Sea is honey?
Also, were you also confused about the kitchen and the bees? The bees
Yes.
were the kitchen.
I did not get that until like the very end when I had to think about it. Like they said it and I was like, okay. And then like I finished the book and that was one of the things that like my brain kept going back to. It's like, oh wait, the bees were in the kitchen in the library building thing, and that
And then
was
they
like one of the
said they
things that
moved
Erin talked
underground.
about in her interview. she said that like in this book, she just put everything that she wanted into the
Yeah,
book, and a magical kitchen was one of the things that she would want in like a super fancy hotel.
100%.
And so that was basically the whole purpose of the kitchen.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm confused about, because bees are like, is it keepers of stories? Are they the keeper of stories, or they know what's gonna happen, and
I
then
yeah.
something
I
like
think
that?
they're like symbolic of the keepers because they were at the house at the end with the keeper, and they
Mm-hmm.
were able to connect like Zachary to Mirabelle
Mm-hmm.
and like that weird facade. Maybe not keepers, but like story makers. Like they were able to create things out of honey, right?
Yeah, they were,
They were
because
so interesting.
yeah, because you know how at the end I think it's an acolyte rhyme, how
Mhm.
she said the buzzing in her ear has like
Yes.
ceased because she doesn't know what's going to happen, and her as an acolyte, I think it's an acolyte, she's represented by the bee,
Yep.
because you know how like the keeper is, I think, a sword or a key, and then the guardians are the swords, the
Right.
guardians are the swords, and then the keepers are the key, and then the acolytes are the bees,
Yeah.
and the acolytes are the ones that they know what's going to happen, therefore they know all stories.
Yeah.
So that's why I think like the bees are like, they know the story, but
Right.
what do they have to do with the kitchen? Do they just, are they just the creator of everything?
I felt like they were just kind of like the, magical elves from Harry Potter.
Yeah, that's true.
Just the workers.
Yeah, worker bees.
Um, so yeah, I really liked the bees though. I was like, once we like got to meet them at the end in that little house, they were
Mm-hmm.
like, I know you don't want this to end, but it's gotta happen.
Yeah,
They were like, strangely enough, the magical bees were like the reality of this entire story.
yeah. And like the cats were the guardians as well of the
Yes.
whole place, which was also interesting.
Yes.
It's like the animals are the guardians, like the owls, and then the bees,
Mhm.
and then the cats.
Yeah, that's interesting. And
Mm.
then like at the literary party at the beginning, and we get it also at the end because it ties around nicely.
Yeah.
Mirabelle dressed as Max from the King of where the Wild Things are. She was the king
Hmm.
of the wild things, which are animals. So it's kind of like a nice.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's just so many things, that little details that they were in there that, like I said, weren't explained thoroughly. So it's just up to our interpretation. So it's just interesting to see what we interpret.
Mhm.
Because, like, obviously, you interpret something different, I interpret something different,
Right.
everyone interprets something different. So
That's why I
it's
feel
very,
like I can read this book every year
yeah,
and get something totally different out of it every time.
exactly.
Okay. So we have an answer now. Yeah,
Yeah.
that moment made me feel like almost empty in a sense. Like I didn't know what to feel at
Yeah.
that moment when they fell into the
Abyss. Yeah.
abyss. I was just like, what is happening?
Yeah, because I was like, oh, action. This is interesting.
Yeah.
Like, what is happening? Because after that, I think the emotional part was definitely Zachary. That hallucination for me was very emotional,
Yeah.
because Zachary went through all this and believing, well, first not believing that this was real, and then trusting his gut instincts, and then
Yeah.
believing everything was real, and then come to this hallucination where his love, Dorian, is telling him, is he having one of his episodes, and that's very heartbreaking
Yeah.
to read.
Especially in that moment where it felt like this was really everything that Zachary had wanted in life. He just
Yeah.
wanted to be able to bring the love of his life home to his mom and his family with his best friend Kat there and just celebrate a moment, and to have it be just taken away from you, swiped away just like that by the love of your life
Yeah.
was just so heartbreaking. Even though it like brought us back to the world where he's trying to find Dory, is like
Because wasn't that quote in the beginning like every moment has meaning or whatever? His mom always tells him.
yeah.
Yeah, which is true. Every moment has meaning,
Yep.
which
I want to
leads
know
to.
what Dorian's real name is.
Yeah. Also with Allegra, you know how she has like two different eyes and she can see and like she can see into the future with one of them or something like that. That's weird. I don't know where she got it in the first place.
That was nuts. Yeah,
Yeah.
Jesse. His mom, the like fortune teller, the future teller,
Yeah.
knew he was alive. I feel like that's like part fortune teller, part just motherly instinct
Mother
that you
instinct.
just
Yeah.
know your kid is still alive. You have no idea where he is, but you know he's still alive.
Yeah. That's a good one. I met my
Yeah.
son-in-law. I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah, that just hit me in the feelers right there.
Yeah. And
The mom
it's
was
so
such a
good to
great like
see.
little character too.
Yeah. And it's so good to see like different characters interacting with her too, like
Yeah.
Kat, and then Allegra as well, and
Mhm.
Mirabelle. Did Mirabelle interact with his mom? No, it's
I
just
think
a painting. No, I think she did
yeah, I think she did.
because she painted the
At one,
door, didn't
right.
she? Yeah. So yeah, all of them interacted with her mom.
Jesse. Jesse the crier.
Anything to do with motherhood, you know, Jesse's there.
She's all over it.
Yeah. Which is obviously fair. She's a mother
We love
herself.
her.
Yeah. She's my mom.
She's all of our moms.
Yeah. She's the bookish mom.
Totally true on many levels.
Yeah.
Um, is there anything else that you want to talk about?
I'm trying to think. It's just mostly just like, yeah, because I just finished this last night. So it's a lot of things to wrap my head around and like
Yeah.
see what I feel about everything. But talking to you and like seeing how you interpret it and how I interpret it, I don't know, it makes me love this book more
Mhm.
just because there's so much meaning to it now.
Yeah.
And it's so intricate with everything that she's put in there. Nothing goes to waste. There's no irrelevant information
Yeah.
or story. Everything is relevant.
That's what I was amazed at. Like, as when I started reading it, I was like, there's a lot of details in here. I'm like, what are we going to be doing with these details? And I was
Yeah.
trying to figure out like which ones are going to be important, which ones are going to be left in the dust,
Hmm.
essentially. But then it became like everything was important to the story. Everything had its own story, and I just appreciated that. Like, although we still have questions and there's still things for us to interpret on our own, the big parts of the story and all of the characters just tied together in the end amazingly. Like my favorite part was that the little side stories that we got throughout
Mm.
came together and tied together in the end, and just like that thought made me cry just to
Yeah.
know that she put so much love and dedication into writing this book to make sure that everything was tied together in the end.
And it
Makes me
shows.
want to buy everything that she writes in the end just to support her. Even if I don't like the
Yeah.
books, which is hard to believe, I would still buy her books just to support her because she put so much dedication into them.
Yeah. You can definitely feel like the love of storytelling and the love of stories in here for sure. I was going to say something, but I totally forgot. It's blank now. Oh, and I was going to say like not everything needs to mean something.
Mhm.
It's just there to be admired. Like this
Yeah.
beauty of the story itself is just there to be admired. Like the story of like the key collector. It's
Yeah.
just a story. It didn't really have anything to do with the entire story in general. At
Right.
least I don't think so. It's just he collected keys and it was
Yeah.
beautiful stories. And like the woman who sculpted stories as well.
Yeah.
It didn't really tie into anything, but it was just there.
To
And
me,
it was
they were like stories that were in the room of stories
yeah,
in the library thing that she won't call a
the
library.
archive.
The archives, yeah, that's what it feels like. And it was just kind of like a taste testing of the stories there. Like we got the
Yeah.
bigger stories that tied together, but then she's like, there's also these little nice stories too.
Yeah. Yeah. And like they're just things to be admired. It's not really like tying in with the story. It doesn't really have any meaning to the story, but it has its own meaning by
Yeah.
itself. So I enjoyed this book very, very much. Also, the tip to read it slowly, like throughout a few, like couple of days, is definitely the way to go.
Yeah.
Just so you savor it more.
I feel like if I tried to speed through this book, I wouldn't have understood anything that was going on.
For sure.
Because it was like when I started off, I started trying to read it like I read a lot of other books, and I'm just, reading the pages and not like I usually like read and then I go back and I think about what I've read later.
Yeah.
And I tried to do that with this book, and it literally forced me to stop and think about it as I'm reading it. I
Yeah.
couldn't just go through it and then go back and think about it. It
Yeah.
was like, no, we're going to stop at this moment right now, and you're going to think about it and figure out what it means to you before we move on with the story.
That's good. Because for me, it was hard just because I didn't know what to make sense of it because I didn't know what was happening. So I was like, okay, it's all right. Just read it,
Yeah.
finish it, and then you can mull over it and see what you think.
Yeah. I definitely had to like push myself to keep reading and not try to figure out what was happening.
Yeah.
But it was like some of the moments were just so beautiful that I had to just pause.
Yeah.
And take a deep breath, write down a quote, and then move on.
Yeah.
Grab a tissue.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't cry, but I did get emotional in that hallucination scene.
Mm-hmm.
It's just very I guess daunting as well because let's say if we were in Zach's position, we would be scared as well.
Yeah,
As to, like,
absolutely.
we thought this was real and now that dream is being taken away.
Yeah. I felt like Morgenstern did a really great job of no matter who our narrator was, who our main character was that we're following, she did a really great job of putting us into their head.
Mm-hmm.
I like, even though we jumped different characters at times,
Yeah.
I never felt lost. I always
Yeah.
felt like I knew who we were behind and like what's going on to a sense of what we could understand at that
Yeah.
point.
And their
You know what I mean?
emotions as well. Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't, I read a lot of books where it jumps between different points of views and I get so lost in who's talking now and where are we now and when are we now. And like right now I'm trying to read The Lies of Lockamora and I'm like, I have no idea what's going on in this story or who's talking or where we're talking or when it's talking. But reading The Starless Sea, I never for 1 second had a problem with that.
Yeah. I think I said in the Discord, it's just kind of like the waves taking you through the story and you're just enjoying the whole experience. That's essentially it.
And it's weird because there's so many things that happen in this book in other books would drive me crazy.
Oh yeah, what were they? Because
well, there was like the point of view shifts. I don't do well with a lot of multiple point of views or sudden changes. There's, the whole thing where as you're reading it, it doesn't make sense until you get to the very end. I like things to, add up as you're going along and so you can figure it out as you're reading it.
Yep.
And sometimes when writing gets like too poetic, you have no idea like what it's really saying.
Okay.
I didn't think that per se with Morgenstern's writing, but a lot of times when you read poetic writing, like even in Addie LaRue, which we were talking about earlier, like it was pretty writing, but I'm like, what's the point of this writing? Whereas in the Starless Sea, you know what the point of everything in this book was.
Yeah.
But it was like all of these things that normally bug me in other books, I had no problem with it in this book. I'm just like, it just kind of like you said, took you along for the on the waves of the honey Starless Sea.
That's weird. We didn't see any wildlife creatures in the sea.
No, just
Yeah.
Dorian.
Yeah, just drowning in the honey.
That moment was so weird.
Yeah,
But it was like, to me, it was weird, but it also felt like it was like perfectly described because I felt like I was stuck in a sea of honey.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I knew exactly what he was going through. I've never been in a sea of honey, but I knew exactly that feeling.
Yeah, we've been near honey. It's sticky as shit. You know, it's so hard to get it off. And imagine just doused in honey. No thanks.
All right, last thoughts.
I just really enjoyed my time with this, and I really can't wait to reread it just to see what I think of it after. Like my mom loved it when she read it when it first came out. She kept pestering me to read it, and I finally have. And she wants to reread it as well. So maybe we'll see. We only have one copy together, so she'll have to go first.
I really enjoyed this book. I can't wait to reread it and see what other things come out with.
Yep. Definitely, because she took 10 years to write this.
Yeah.
So
it's insane.
We'll have to wait another 10 years, I guess.
Yes. She's working on a springtime book now, so.
Yeah. I mean, which is fine. This is a masterpiece that she has.
I definitely enjoyed this much more than the Night Circus. I still enjoyed the Night Circus, but I didn't feel as invested as I did in this book.
Where is it? I tabbed this as well.
Ooh, that's a lot of tabs.
Yeah, I tabbed it as well. I think when I first read it, I was like a baby. I gave 5 stars to everything. So I was like, this is the best shit that I've read ever. But obviously not. It was good, but it wasn't
at the time.
Yeah, and that's the cover that I have.
I have one that's similar, but it has like a circle, I think, with like a picture behind it. You know what I mean?
I've tried to find that
kind
cover,
of like a cutout.
This is the closest I could find. It was good.
So I will link the interview in both of our Discords so you guys can see that. I also took a quiz on the publisher's website that told me I'm an acolyte. So I'll link that on the Discords too, so you guys can find out what you are. I want to
take that quiz. I want to be a bee.
It was a very short quiz. It was like I think it was like 5 questions. I wish I printed it off beforehand. I didn't think about it. It was like 5 questions, and there was like 3 choices, A, B, or C. And then it was like one of those, like, if you got mostly A's, you're this. If you got mostly B's, you're this.
Yeah.
But it was fun. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Vish. Or this morning for you. Now you can go back to bed before work. Yeah. Thank you all for joining us also, Kristen, Jesse, everyone that showed up. You guys made it fun because Vish and I were talking before we started. We're like, how are we going to talk about this book? We hope that people are here that can help us talk about this.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for joining us. Thanks for letting us like work through this book. And I'll post the video of this recording also, so you guys can go back and watch us try to work our way through this book. Thank you all. Have a great night. Have a great day, Vish.
Thank you.
See
Have
you
a
all
good night.
soon.
Bye.
Bye.